to continue with from the seventh ray, the supreme sign. We will continue with the ninth degree, right? Okay, ninth degree. Before we continue, since we have a lot of new attendees, I think it's good to maybe first just a quick summary of what we're studying, and then hopefully summary of or what we remember from last week, and then we can continue with this week. So the supreme sign, again, we're studying the verse in the beginning. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, the seven heavens and the earth and all that is in them, extol and glorify him, and there is nothing but glorifies him with praise. But you understand not their glorifying. Indeed, he is most forbearing, most forgiving. So it's the verse about how everything is extolling and glorifying God. And then Nursi then talks about a voyager, a traveler who's now traveling. He starts from like basically the universe from like a zoomed out view, like the planets and the stars, and then he zooms into like the earth, the globe, the atmosphere, the wind, the mountains, the rivers, the oceans. Like one by one, he's just going through all these levels of how could I read these things for myself? How could I read them? How do I find that these things are extolling, glorifying God? So he has this journey of trying to find God. And that's what we've been doing for the past several weeks. So right now we're on the ninth degree. The eighth degree we did last week was slightly different than the previous degrees. So we had been kind of looking at the universe and like the creation. As I said, like the wind, the atmosphere, the trees, the plants. But then last week we kind of switched. Instead of looking now at, I guess, like things we might call nature, now we switched our view and looked at humans. So how do humans tell me about there is no God but he, or how do humans glorify God? And that was now a switch. So I guess we could start there. Would anyone like to share what they remember from last week, or if anything stayed with them regarding this discussion of humans and how humans are glorifying God? And specifically, what about humans did we first study too? Do you remember? I guess we're waiting. Oh, but I'm kinder. She can do it to me. I can't do it to her. I know my place. Uh, any with Atik. I'm sure you remember something. Could you remember? Humans. Are you a human?
Yeah, so the one thing that I remember is about the question that I asked is like we were studying about all of those things and like human was not specifically mentioned in the ayat, and like how those human systems are we going to understand? And then Brother Burkan made a very important point is like there are all of those other functions that are present in the human body that are going on and we're not taking notice of those things and we're not understanding those. So I think that was a very important point for me in the whole discussion, as like a lot of like our body is being made at this very instance and we're not realizing that, we're not understanding all of that. We are being maintained and all of those things, so we should recognize that. So that is what stayed with me from the previous discussion.
I mean,
Other than that, like as soon as Imam Nursi delved into the realm of man, he went straight to the prophets. And starting from the prophets, he talked about how Allah has sent them with the message and Allah has granted them miracles, which certify their claim that they're messengers of God, and how all of these miracles are not just mere stories that we read, but these are things that were witnessed by hundreds of thousands of veracious and like intelligent men and people who verified these miracles and saw these miracles. So these are not just mere stories, but the verification by all of these people actually support their claim to prophethood as well. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you. One more comment, if anyone has. Something that stayed with you. I'm sure something stayed with you. Unless you're just like, oh, what a boring discussion. Okay. So I think, as you said very beautifully, the first thing Nursi does when he broaches this topic of humans is he goes to not just you and me or some random people on the street. He goes to directly, who are the humans that truly are representing the best of humanity? Who are the humans? I remember Nursi had a specific sentence that take humans out of being animals to being like kind of angelic. So kind of fulfilling the purpose of humans, which is not just to be like animals. We had studied before animals and birds, but now humans are in a separate degree. And then he goes to the prophets. He goes to the prophets first. And I remember even there was this phrasing he used. He said, and he kneeled to study with them, or he kneeled to like take heed and listen to them. And then he looked at all of the communities that were following them. He looked at all the things that proved they were prophets. Like one of these was like miracles, other things like their character, their virtue, their morals, their self-sacrifice, a lot of different things that he said added on to like their veracity, like the truthfulness of them. So he said altogether, this was like a proof. They presented a proof. So there we had kind of briefly talked about how the communities and people followed the prophets. This week in the 9th degree, we're going to continue that. So right after the prophets kind of come his followers, or let's say scholars, and then after that maybe the saints. So the next 2 degrees are about these people. So inshallah we can start with the 9th degree and then start discussing that. And if we have time, we can go to the 10th degree as well, because I think that they're very related. So if I can have a volunteer. You have a comment?
So throughout this text, we've been looking at how we discussed some of this last week, but we've been talking about how, this traveler is going through different parts of the world and seeing how they glorify their creator, right? So the clouds, the skies, vegetation, animals. And so when he turns to human beings, it poses the same question of how does this aspect of creation, namely human beings, right, also glorify God? And by turning to the prophets, I guess we're turning to human beings who are verbally, right, through their ability to choose, verbally acknowledging their creator, and so verbally glorifying God. Although all human beings in their very creation, in their very being, glorify God, right? Whether they declared or not, like through their actions, through just the way that they exist, right? Their very body glorifies God, their faculties glorify God. But I guess it's interesting to me that he's looking at how different parts of the world, how different creation glorifies God, and now we're kind of looking at how human beings, both specifically verbally through their choice, also follow this model that we find exemplified in the rest of creation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we had touched on this in one of the other weeks, but really this traveler, he's like, I think we all have this need to sometimes make sense of the world, understand why we're here, why did thing happen, why did something happen. So we all have this need to find God, let's say, or find things that speak of God or things that tell me of God. And like, for example, like the most basic example is like, oh, I wish the prophet existed right now so I could go and ask him. Like if there was a prophet, like I need someone to tell me about God. And I think like this journey of the traveler, it's kind of finding all these things that are telling him about God or her about God. And it makes a lot of sense that now when he went to humans, it's like, let me find a human that can tell me the most about God, or that can represent or tell me like what the correct path is or represent it the best. So you went to the prophets, and now we're going to continue with that. And after the prophets, now there's other people that followed, and then there's even other people that follow that. So we're gonna, I guess we can get started with studying that. So let me. Nebros, actually, you read a bit fast. Too fast for me to understand. Atik, would you like to read?
Where am I starting from?
9th degree.
Is that he saw?
The questing traveler, having derived a lofty taste of truth.
What page is that?
That question. 142, end of the page. 40.
I found it. Okay, that questing traveler, having derived a lofty taste of truth from the power of belief, found himself invited while coming from the assembly of the prophets, peace be upon them, to the classroom of those profound, original, exacting scholars who affirm the claims of the prophets, peace be upon them, with the most decisive and powerful proofs, and who are known as the purified and most veracious ones. Entering their classroom, he saw thousands of geniuses and hundreds of thousands of exact and exalted scholars, proving all the affirmative matters connected with faith, headed by the necessity of God's existence and his unity, with such profound demonstrations as to leave not the least room for doubt. Indeed, the fact that they are agreed in the principles and pillars of belief, despite their differences in capacity and outlook, and that each of them relies on a firm and certitudinous proof, is in itself such evidence that it can be doubted only if it is possible for a similar number of intelligent and perspicacious men to arrive at a single result. Otherwise, the only way for the denier to oppose them is to display his ignorance, his utter ignorance, and his obstinacy with respect to negative matters that admit neither of denial nor affirmation. He will in effect be closing his eyes, but the one who closes his eyes is able to turn day into night only for himself. The traveler learned that the lights emitted in this vast and magnificent classroom by these respected and profound scholars had been illumining half of the globe for more than 1,000 years. He found in it moral and spiritual force that the combined strength of all the people of denial would be unable to shake or destroy. In brief allusion to the lesson learned by the traveler in this classroom, we said in the 9th degree of the first station, there is no God but God, to whose necessary existence and unity points the agreement of all of the purified scholars with the power of their resplendent, certain, and unanimous proofs. Okay.
So if you have thoughts, you can share them. But I'll go with my initial thoughts. It's interesting that in the prophethood one, we were talking about miracles and how they all are being affirmed because of these miracles and these truths. And of course, they talked about community there too. But now, when in this next section with the scholars, it's now talking about proofs. Like there's this proof aspect of it. And in the beginning, it says something like, he joined their classroom. He entering their classroom. He saw these thousands and thousands of these scholars, proving all the affirmative matters connected with the faith. So there's like a proof there. I remember last week thinking with these miracles, it's still something a little external. It's not something, it definitely has value and definitely shows something, but it's still something external. I need something more, let's say, day to day, or that I can, witness myself, confirm myself, which are potentially these proofs. And then these scholars who are, of course, following these prophets, like it is after the assembly of the prophets that you enter the classroom of these scholars. You enter to learn from their proofs. So that was one thing that took my attention. And I guess I'll stop there, and I kind of open the floor. Does anyone in their lives, I guess, let's say let's put ourselves into the foot or the shoes of this traveler. So we found the prophets, or we're trying to find the prophets, and now let's say we find scholars around us or scholars in history, do you look at these scholars, or are you able to look at these scholars, and maybe even are you entering their classroom, and then are you able to gain certainty through their proofs, or are you able to even read their proofs? Is that something that you can relate with?
Or if I can ask the question from a different angle, in today, where do we seek this sort of knowledge? Like, do we really rely on this classroom that he is mentioning, or those are the people that are like that we do not pay attention to because they are pretty much the legacy tradition of the losers of today. So like, yeah, I mean, whatever they said, if what they said was true, then they would be the ones that are running the world today. So how much attention do we pay to them? Because to me, it sounds like what he's suggesting in here is somewhat similar to, or contrast to, like Greek philosophers. But today, when we talk about Greek philosophers, they're being respected a lot, actually. If you go to any of those Penn's buildings, you will see names of those philosophers, scientists engraved on those buildings, for example. So those are respected people within the society that we live in. But now the author is mentioning another classroom, and he's talking about them being more respectable in terms of being humans and praising their Lord. So where do I stand, or are they equally valid, or like what is it? Why would this group of people, what they say would make more sense? Or yeah, I just maybe comparing it this way, at least in our world, can help understanding where we are standing.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I have some of my questions that I have after reading this. The first one is that the text talks about how these scholars proving all the affirmative matters connected with faith, headed by the necessity of God's existence and his unity, with such profound demonstrations as to leave not the least room for doubt. I personally speaking, what demonstrations are we talking about? Because I have not seen any demonstrations that would make me think, wow, you know, like for certain God is there. So what demonstrations are we talking about? And also, because we're making the argument that this classroom of scholars is glorifying God to play devil's advocate, is it also not a proof that, or like, is it also not invoking questions about a proof in God? Because there are all these different scholars who all call themselves Muslim, but there is so much discord between them. They can't agree on, you know, some basic things, or even, you know, some of us like on how to pray, or a lot of other things like interest, whatever. Doesn't that point towards, you know, discord within the religion, instead of rather glorifying God?
I think this is an important question. And in another portion of the recital, we had talked about the line of prophethood and the line of philosophy, right? And if we look at these classroom of scholars as being, as you know, Imam Nursi describing that line of prophethood, like this lineage of instruction from the prophets, through which, as he says, like thousands of scholars also then continuing to this day from Nursi himself, whose text we're reading, and he's connected to all those scholars as well, right? He's connected to that line of prophethood. When we compare that, for example, to the line of philosophy, there is no point of agreement there, certainly, right? There's lots of thoughts, but very few, I would say, points of agreement, truly. Now here he's, in the text, if we look at it carefully, he's saying affirmative matters connected with faith. So matters that are directly related to belief, right? and here specifically of the necessity of God's existence and unity. So specifically on the matter of Tawheed, when we look at, the thousands of works by Muslim scholars, there is no doubt that on that point they are unanimous, right? So whether we've, read all those texts, I don't think any of us have read all of those texts, right? I mean, we don't even have access to all those texts. But when we look at just the general breadth of the amount of scholarship, like whether we see it or not, it's there. And you have through hundreds and centuries of years, right? All of these very different people, very intelligent people who are agreeing on these very matters, that can still give you a sense of, okay, there is an agreement here. There's a consensus here that is happening, right? And that consensus that was reached by these people, I am now reading from a text and benefiting from a text, right? Every Friday, in fact, we are. That is not isolated from that lineage of scholarship either. Obviously, there's, matters of disputes on, as you said, how we might pray or other things like that. But when we look at the fundamentals of belief, there is no sort of I would say, at least from my limited understanding, there is no extreme contradiction I see amongst the scholars.
Yeah, I feel like there's someone that wants to speak here, but I think I agree. In terms of La ilaha illahu, like there's no God but He, I think a lot of most people, or a lot of people can agree or are mirrors to that, or kind of reflecting that there's no God but He. Like if I look at scholars or people from a country I've never been to, or I look at the US or Turkey or some other countries, I see that there can be huge differences, but still there is this idea that there's more to life, that there is a meaning to this, that there's a necessity, like there's one whose existence is necessary, like a God, like basically one who is everything is created by him. There's a unity I observe in the world. Like even in different religions, you could see this, but definitely, let's say in Islam, you could see other scholars and people at this level of La ilaha illahu. At the very least, there's agreement. That I could see. Of course, I think as Brother Yusuf was saying, the scholars of today are really, I'm not really familiar with much scholars. I mean, of course, the famous ones in the US, I've heard their names. Maybe I've listened to some talks, like we've all heard about them, but usually we don't want to put them to the degree of scholars, maybe I would say. Like for us, they're like, yeah, they're nice Islamic YouTube celebrities, Islamic speakers. It's nice to listen and just like spend some time in maybe one of their conferences, but we don't put them to the level of like scholars. We don't maybe respect them that much. But then the scholars really are my professor, the scientists, these huge science books that are explaining things. These are the true scholars that I believe, or that I generally try to witness. And there is definitely no statement of there's no God but He. So there is this big contradiction, or big I guess problem in my life with that.
So like I studied undergrad in Turkey and did a master's in Turkey. So I went through academic institutions a little bit in there. And so I have an understanding of the standards of education in there and whatnot. So in that environment, as I was studying in that environment, say coming and visiting US for a conference and listening to presentations or visiting one of the universities and whatnot. So you say, oh, that's a different level of research. Like by visiting it, you don't have to understand everything that's being taught, but you just go and visit a lab. You see that people are taking their job very serious. They are not randomly, I mean, most of the time, generating numbers for publishing papers, or at least it is much less than how it's happening back in home. So once you visit the environment, it gives you an impression that these guys are doing it serious. What we used to do there is just like, I mean, we are far, far away from how science should be conducted. So once you even just pass by it for a week and a little bit get into there, you get the sense that, oh, like we have way more to work so as to get to their degree of science and whatnot. Or I guess the same could apply for, let's say you are at a middle level university, then you go and see students in a top tier university. So you can see the difference between them. Now, author is mentioning in here, let's go and visit what the scholars, or as Strashener was saying, so the followers of prophets, what did they do? What sort of works they put forth? And their claims, once we get into books, and yes, now we have Nursi, and we have been studying Nursi for years here. And like, it's not being like, this is a mystery or you need to accept it. And it's not the language that we are being introduced to here. So by studying the existence that we observe, step by step, saying that, do you see this rose here? So it's done in a way that it speaks to your eyes, it speaks to your senses and whatnot. So can it happen by itself? Like, we are questioning, as it started, the questing traveler. So we are having this conversation with the author and in general Islamic scholarship in this sense, and we are arriving to a conclusion. So once I see this picture, I say, well, this is truly stepping their feet on a solid ground. Like, this level of scholarship is really knowing what they are talking about. Of course, if I contrast this to like, I don't know, maybe telling stories, or, I mean, it has a different place. But author in here specifically talking about those people are making proofs. So at the level of, if you were to go and visit Penn and see the labs and how they take serious what they are doing. So what scholars did, and as we are now studying one of them, is way more serious about what they have been doing. And the results that they provide is, you don't have to visit the laboratory. You are the laboratory. You are, and your environment is the laboratory. And he says, here are the tools for you. Go and try for yourself. So this is being the strength of what is being offered to us by the students of prophets.
So this is not exactly like about the gist of the matter. So here, it's about how to maybe benefit from the scholars, how to see, use their conviction to support your conviction and so on and so forth. But I like to touch upon something in the text, but maybe the auxiliary matter, which is how he defines the scholars. So we have this tendency when we talk about this, especially as Islamic scholars, we have this tendency to look at the people who talk about Islam, who have some degree in some Egyptian universities, and we call them as scholars. And they are scholar in one sense, in the academic setup that we are, studying and so on. They are a scholar in that setup. But when he talks about the scholars, he's saying that those with profound, the evidence, a profound, original, exacting scholars who affirm the claims of the Prophet. So they study these matters themselves, for themselves, and then affirming them one by one, and then say that, oh, now I believe in it, right? It's talking about such people. It's not talking about those who memorize it or have some, again, the good voice, let's say, of reading some text, or the people who can speak about Islam or Muslims or Prophet and so on in a really nice way and so on. And most of the scholars that we think today, it's usually among such people, right? The people we see on YouTube. So he's not talking about them. It's at least to me, it's obvious. So when you look at the only a few names, for instance, the Imam Nursi gives, like he uses in his entire set of text. When you look at their lives, you see that, for instance, like Nursi himself, or Ghazali, or whatever, like the big guys we have, you see in their lives, they usually have some the period of crisis, right? Because they study it themselves, try to understand themselves, they have to prove whatever in front of them to themselves. They have to go through this crisis. Sometimes you cannot prove everything. Sometimes you cannot affirm everything. And you start having these questions and so on and so forth. With these real scholars, we see that there are such periods. There are these transformations in their lives and so on and so forth. Because it's about their understanding, their conviction. Okay? So this could be one criteria, for instance, for us to decide who is scholar, who is not, and so on, from our perspective, of course. So when we talk about such people, he says, we don't see any contradiction when it comes to necessity, like two important things he mentions, not the details, but the necessity of the God's existence, his being wajibul wujud, and then his unity. Wahdat tawhid. About these two, you never see any contradiction, he says. If you look at such people, right? Again, no need to name, but it's your responsibility to find such people. And you can apply this to the other domains as well, like Yusuf was giving the examples from the academia. Again, we respect such people that who can speak profoundly, who seems to be, knowing everything with some titles and so on and so forth. But if you apply these criteria there and ask whether this person that I respect within his domain, whether he can really explain me everything that he claims, whether he can prove them. It doesn't need to be, he goes onto the board and writes some equations, but at least convince me that what he's claiming, first and foremost, convinced himself, and then to me. Can he do that? Can she do that? If you apply this criteria, you will see that 99% of these so-called scholars would fail. So we should be careful with this idea of scholarship in any domain. If you have such people, let's say in biology, go and respect them within their domain. Otherwise, don't be fooled with their titles, with their profound speaking, with their certainty, and so on and so forth. Ask yourself whether they are really convinced themselves, going through all these claims that they make themselves, or are they just memorizing things? Just like these Islamic scholars today do. Just memorizing things, right? The same thing applies to any other domains as well.
Jazakallah khairan. I think, as you said, it's very important that, here Nursi is really focusing on this concept of decisive and powerful proofs. Like when we go in front of a scholar, we should be able to ask those questions. We should be able to find answers to those questions, and they should give us answers. And those are the people that are at least the highest level of the scholars that maybe we should be seeking. And if we don't see that we find those scholars, then we need to go look for them at least, or it should be like an encouragement to go look for them. You want to
maybe one addition. So when it comes to such topics, we also have these questions, but like he's talking about how that many intelligent people, all these scholars, coming to the same conclusion, which becoming a proof itself, just their overlap, the agreement. And we say, but there are all these other intelligent people who say the otherwise. So again, the point is, ask them whether they can prove anything, right? Thousands of people come and says, oh no, the universe, started from nothing by itself. Ask them, can you prove it to me, please? Yeah, So if you see that they confirm everything they say by proving decisive proofs and evidence and so on and so forth, yep, you can believe them. But otherwise, 1,000, 10,000, 1 million doesn't matter at all. It's just, some insects making noise. You wouldn't say just because, 1,000 insects coming together and making a big noise, you wouldn't say, oh, they are saying something intelligible.
I know we've talked about this before, but like positive proof versus negative proofs, and maybe let's not go too deep into it, but there is this thing where just because a lot of people are negating something or saying it doesn't exist, or if a lot of people say it doesn't exist, it doesn't add to each other. They're not supporting each other. They're just simply saying we couldn't find it or I couldn't see it. Whereas if a lot of people are saying I found something, this exists, then that does support each other. And in a similar way, if we can find these scholars, and I think, yeah, asking these questions, like whether it's the science teacher, the professors, like you ask these questions. I mean, internally, we're asking these questions anyways, because we need those answers. Like I need those answers in my life. Like, oh, is it all just random? Is it all just chance? Is it all this? Like I'm asking those questions anyways. And if the science is not able to answer me, or if their only answer is, yeah, what is God, or there is no God, or there is no meaning, just denying rather than giving proofs of how there is no God. Like I see order, I see will, I see knowledge, I see power, and then the conclusion is randomness, or it just happens by itself. Then there's like a denial of all those things. So whereas on the other side, I could see proofs. Like people are saying, yes, these things point to something. Again, I guess it comes back to asking those questions, whichever way you're going. Honestly, this is really all I have for this degree. If no one has a further comment, we can go to the next degree as well, I think. Because in this next degree is also similar. It goes into the saints. This was the scholars. Now we're going to talk about the saints. Does that make sense? Brother Yusuf, go to the next one. I'm the moderator. Okay. Okay, then Atiq, would you also like to read the 10th degree then? Oh,
How does it start?
I contemplated travel.
Okay. Our contemplative traveler came forth from the classroom, ardently desiring to see the lights that are to be observed in the continuous strengthening and development of faith, and in advancing from the degree of the knowledge of certainty to that of the vision of certainty. He then found himself summoned by thousands or millions of spiritual guides who were striving toward the truth and attaining the vision of certainty in the shade of the highway of Muhammad, upon whom be peace, and the ascension of Muhammad, upon whom be peace. This they were doing in a meeting place, a hospice, a place of remembrance and preceptorship that was abundantly luminous and vast as a plain, being formed from the merging of countless small hospices and convents. Upon entering, he found that those spiritual guides, people of unveiling and wondrous deeds, were unanimously proclaiming no God but He, on the basis of their witnessing and unveiling of the unseen and the wondrous deeds they had been enabled to perform. They were proclaiming the necessary existence and unity of God. The traveler observed how manifest and clear must be a truth to which unanimously subscribed these sacred geniuses and luminous Gnostics. For like the sun is known through the seven colors in its light, the saints' luminous colors, their light-filled hues, their true paths and right ways and veracious courses are manifested from the light of the pre-eternal sun through 70 colors. Indeed, through colors to the number of the divine names, and are all different. He saw that the unanimity of the prophets and the agreement of the purified scholars and accord of the saints forms a supreme consensus more brilliant than the daylight that demonstrates the existence of the sun. In brief allusion to the benefit derived by our traveler from the Sufi hospice, we said in the 10th decree of the first station, there is no God but God, to whose necessary existence in unity points the unanimity of the saints in their manifest, well affirmed, and attested divinations of the truth and wondrous deeds. Now,
Yeah, so this is the 10th degree. So after the classroom of the scholars, the traveler now exits the classroom and goes to see the saints. And he says, found himself summoned by thousands or millions of spiritual guides. Before, for the scholars, I think he used thousands or hundreds of thousands, but now it's like even a bigger number when it talks to saints, like up to millions of saints. And here, I'm not sure what this means. I do have a question there. He says, the vision of certainty in the shade of the highway of Muhammad alayhi salam and the ascension of Muhammad alayhi salam, which is something he didn't talk about in the scholars. The scholars, he was very focused on proofs, affirmative proofs. Now with the saints, it's kind of the highway of Muhammad alayhi salam and the ascension. I'm guessing the miraj, it means of Muhammad alayhi salam. So there is like a different path. And he sees that these people are all doing like wondrous deeds. They're spiritual guides. They're all proclaiming there's no God but He. It is less, I guess, in a technical proof way, but they're more about action and belief and deeds. They seem to be proving that there is no God but He in, let's say, their actions or the way they behave, what they're doing. And he goes on to say, basically, there's every color of the sun. There's every type of these saints. They all capture the lights in their own way. They're all reflecting a light in their own way. So they can all be very different. Like with the scholars, we were saying that despite all their differences, they agreed on La ilaha illahu, this belief. And now these saints, they're not really all the same. It's more like the sun is there, but each of the saints are reflecting a different ray of that sun. So it's more like they're showing a more wide, comprehensive light, I would say. It's more different than the scholars. And altogether they form a proof, the prophets, the scholars, and the saints. So I guess you can't really take them all separately, like they all come together as well. So that's what the 10th degree is, the saints. I think this one was a little bit easier for me to relate to. I think the saints, I mean, here he even said millions. Like the saints are just people around you that you see. Maybe they're not at the level of a saint, but people around you see they're sincere, they're worshipers, they're following. You see in their acts the way they behave, how they live. There's they're reflecting something, or they're the way they behave. It's saying something. Like there is no God but He. Like I've had influential people in my life, role models in my life, which I could say this. And even let's say these YouTube celebrities, maybe to some of them, we could say they can be role models in their own way. Maybe not in terms of proofs, but in terms of being like saints. They can show like they're kind of reflecting their belief in God and by their deeds, their acts. So this is one I could relate a bit more to. I found for myself. Anyone else's thoughts about how saints? Who cares about saints? You entered and everyone stopped listening. But okay. Are saints a part of your life? What does it mean for saints to follow the ascension of Muhammad or the highway of Muhammad? Yeah.
So I think we could maybe relate this back to the hadith of Jibril, where he mentions the three main parts of maybe Islam. There's belief, there's Islam, the practice, and there's ihsan or perfection.
Islam, the practice, and Ihsan, the
There's iman, belief, Islam, practice, and there's ihsan or perfection. And so iman maybe related to creed, aqidah, Islam, the realm of, what is halal and haram, maybe the realm of scholars, and ihsan, maybe the realm of the Sufi guides or some guide who can, elevate you and teach you, how to do things in the perfect way, not just what is right and wrong, but with maybe adab or perfection.
I think the distinction that he made in there in terms of conviction, like the traveler was enjoying and desiring to see more light, so he enjoyed and he wants more of it. And as we have been seeing, as if the topic is expanding as we move forward. He started with prophets, then he talked about scholars, and for them, as if he's saying that the conviction that the traveler got from these two is a conviction of knowledge. But then when it comes to saints, with sainthood, he mentioned certainty of vision. Certainty of vision. Like with prophets, we do see prophets at best through narrations, unless we will see them through saints. Scholars, we read through their books, they speak to our intellect. So they speak to our conviction in intellect. So author was mentioning them, as far as I see, under the category of they give you a conviction, a certainty in terms of knowledge. I am sure that this is the case, but it's a knowledge. Like it is more so like, we talked about this example before, but when they talk about this three different certainties, they talk about certainty of knowledge, certainty of vision, and certainty of truth. For certainty of knowledge, they give the example of you see, like from behind the mountain, you see smoke. So you say there must exist a fire there. Like this is a necessary conclusion of your knowledge. You haven't seen the fire. Then you climb the mountain. From far, you see the fire with your eyes. Then you say, oh, this is certainty of vision. There's fire. But then you walk next to the fire and put your hand into the fire, and now it burns. Now you are sure it is fire. So they say this is the certainty of truth. This is the utmost level of certainty that you can get to. So in here, when he was mentioning, after mentioning prophets and scholars, he said his conviction shined in terms of knowledge. But this, as he was mentioning prophets, he was mentioning followers. Now we come to specific people. These are saints, and saints should be the people that are around you as well. But this is where you now get to observe the person and how the prophetic message changed that person's life. I mean, if you don't have access to prophet's person, you have access to prophet's student, and you see how it works. Like, this is the important part. I can claim you many things, but you say, well, if what you're saying is good, let me see it in your life. So that, like, rather than talking to me for hours, just demonstrate it in your life. And once I am sitting next to you, I will sense it. Or even sometimes you just sense it from the tranquility of the person and whatnot. So you say that this person is not anxious. Like in moments of anxiety, let's say. So you say, well, this person is supposed to be super anxious at this moment. Well, you see that the guy is not anxious. So this is something shocking normally for you. Like, what's wrong? Either you say, what sort of a drug you take? Or you would say, what sort of a conviction are you up to? So this sort of thing is now giving you a vision, like a certainty of vision. You know it's, I mean, you haven't experienced it yourself, but you're sitting next to the guy and you see how that person is feeling or sensing. As a human, you cannot relate to this. So you say, yes, I mean, this is definitely working. There's an example of that. Because with certain ideologies, let's say, like some people come up with an ideology and saying that this is how I'm going to establish social justice among people. Sounds very nice over the paper. Like you're reading it, you say, yeah, it must work well. Then you say, well, do we see this in action anywhere? Because I would like to see it in action. So if I can see a society in which this one is working, I'm going to be more convinced about it. I say, yeah, this, at least intellectually, this works better than this other ideology. Okay, fine. But okay, let's see it in action. Otherwise, it sounds like those, what was it? We have a Tesla worker here, but there was a Nikola, like, the truck company Nikola. Like the guy just came up with blueprints, got a lot of investments, and bought house for himself and his family and whatnot, and then gone bankrupt. So he just come up with blueprints. He didn't even make a single truck. So the investors were just tricked. So you would like to see it in action. So this is where, as far as I can see, the saints, as saints, he's describing that those people who have lived this in their lives, and they have this, and mostly he's highlighting, underlying that they are within the highway of Muhammad ﷺ, and highway, like Sharia means highway. So actually he's saying that they are following Sharia of Muhammad ﷺ. So they were within what the Prophet have established as life, and they are following the ascension of the Prophet, which we have been talking about, how this author right now in this text is also having an ascension. So by following these footsteps, so what they do is what Prophet did. But if what I understand from getting to know Prophet is simply narrations, it's going to be a knowledge, a certainty of knowledge. When I see Prophet in the mirror of a saint, still I am seeing Prophet's students, but now it's in real life, right next to me, to whatever extent I can relate to. So the conviction that this person gives to me is going to be way stronger, because at a moment of crisis, a person staying calm and saying, Alhamdulillah, I say, wow, like this works. I have seen that it's working. So it's the conviction that it gives is way different than the rest.
Yeah. And as was mentioned, this is kind of I guess there's a purpose behind this traveler going through here. It's not just knowledge, but it's like trying to find his creator, or trying to find like a glorification of his creator, or why he exists, like the purpose of his existence. And then now he's trying to go from the level of knowledge and proofs to also getting that light, living it, reflecting that light himself. And it ties it again right back, because I was wondering, when it talked about the prophets, it did kind of mention the prophets on an individual level, like they were being self-sacrificing and how truthful they were and honest and all those things. But really the emphasis seemed more on the miracles there. Still, there was this emphasis on miracles, which still feels like an external kind of thing. And then the last one was scholars, which is proofs, but it's still a little bit theoretical or technical. It's still a bit external, but now we're coming to saints, where it's very personal, it's very relatable, it's very intimate. Like this is your day-to-day life. You're living it, you're experiencing it. You see others around you living it, experiencing it. So it's like slowly, and then it wraps it back to the Prophet, saying like the Sharia of the Prophet and the ascension of the Prophet. So it's still following the path of that Prophet, but now it's more in a certainty of what was it? Certainty of touch, or living it, vision. So it's, I guess, like you keep progressing. The purpose of, I guess, the knowledge, right, hearing it, is not just to stay there. It's like for it to impact your life, for it to change your life, for you to see how others are approaching. Like you see someone approaching their life in a much more peaceful way, but you're approaching in a very distressful way. You're like, how can I do that? So let me try to find all these things that are glorifying God and benefit from that.
Now I'm on higher ground. I have to speak from a different level. So this is a journey of a traveler, and traveler is us. So whatever path he goes through is internal. So when we say, when we talk about the prophets, which is a little bit distant, and he's talking about the miracles, which I don't see, and so on and so forth. So I don't think he's talking about the prophet object out there lived, the 14 centuries ago with specific miracles and so on and so forth. But this is a phase that you've been through. And what I mean with that, so you are trying to understand the maker of this universe. Like this is how it started. The travel is started by, who is the maker of this universe? And what you do, you study the universe first, the artwork, and then look at the artwork, what it tells you. You see the qualities in the artwork, and they all points to their maker. You start learning about their maker. You say, oh, there must be someone who knows everything. There must be someone who has power over everything, and so on and so forth. You reach certain understanding of the creator from the artwork. But then it is again your expectation that this creator must be speaking to me as a human being. I'm the human being. So it is your expectation still, very internal to you, that there must be these representative folks, as we call them as prophets. There must be such people. This is still very internal because this is my expectation. I need such people. There must be such people. My creator must be speaking in this way. So he's talking about the miracles, and I think that makes perfect sense because we're talking about the origination of the Wahi, the revelation. So when it comes to saints and so on, the scholars and so on and so forth, the revelation is there. And they are trying to understand the revelation. But when we're talking about the origination, origin, let's say, the revelation is coming, somebody being appointed by whom? The maker of the creator, the absolute being. This whole thing, it's a miraculous thing. So there must be these miracles to confirm that this originating of the revelation, the beginning of the revelation. Somebody actually receiving a revelation from the absolute being. Hence, there must be some confirmation out there. Again, my expectations. There must be this miraculous setup somewhere. Miraculous, I don't know, the example instances accompanying this appointed person. These are all my expectations. So when somebody talks about the miracles, I don't say, what miracle? What? I don't understand what you see, what you say. No, you say, oh yeah, miracles. I think they must exist, right? It's still with you. So then you are again with prophets. Remember the text? In the text, prophets invite him, and he speaks with prophets in the text. So it's not about something distant. It's you. It's within you, with you. Your relationship with the prophets. So there must be such people. I should have some access to them, and so on and so forth. Similarly, the scholars. When he talks about the scholars, he's not just talking about their the writings and so on. You say there must be such scholars being trained by the prophet who can study the message that the prophet brought, study it, prove it, right? Show how truthful it is, and so on and so forth. There must be such people. And then you study their texts, their whatever products they have. And you see that that many people following the same scholars and so on. So it's still internal. It's speaking to one aspect of you, maybe, that you're trying to prove something, but then you're trying to live the same thing. Again, you trying to live something. So when he talks about the saints, definitely he's not talking about some mystical, the sacred people and so on, doing some strange things that we cannot understand. No, he says the people, based on the proofs of these scholars, convinced that this is the true pathway, and now they are going through this pathway and living it. Right? So this, again, not external. My expectation, there must be such thing, and then I should be also able to do that, just like scholars. I should be able to prove things. Again, what is expected from me, what I expect from the truth, it must be provable by me as well. If I take enough time, put enough time, be serious and so on, just like scholars. Same way, just like the saints, if I go from this, follow this pathway of the prophet and try to have this ascension myself, Miraj, the author says it will change you. It will change your personality. It will be reflected on you. So from beginning to end, I think it's very internal. It should be very internal. I mean, if we just categorize it as, this part is about just, the intellectual understanding, and now it's talking about your feelings, and no. It's you have a conviction, and then you living this conviction.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, that in each stage, it is all things that, as a traveler, I'm going through. They're relevant to me. They're things I care about. And I go through them, as Brother Rikan explained, like I expect these things, or I'm searching for these things. And so I guess, like, in conclusion, here in the 10th degree, he's saying that when we take the prophets, and then we take the scholars, and then we take the saints, all together, they provide a very strong proof, like a proof you cannot disagree with, in terms of the unity of God. I don't know what he says exactly. He says, the unanimity of the prophets and the agreement of the purified scholars and the accord of the saints forms a supreme consensus, more brilliant than the daylight that demonstrates the existence of the sun. So all together, like they all come together. I might even say that it almost sounds like without the saints, without those scholars, maybe there is no connection to those prophets, or there is no prophets even for you. Like they all have, in some sense, you need to have them all together. And they all have to be together. You can't just take one, maybe. You can't just go alone. Or can you just go alone and do whatever you want without being part of, understanding those three groups, or being part of those three groups? That's kind of what I understand. I'll go with Dua first, and then...
I'm a little confused because we've talked about how saints are students of the prophet, but then I'm thinking, what does it mean to be a student of the prophet? Because when I think about some of the methods that saints apply, or some of their beliefs or teachings, they don't seem to be the ones that were employed by the prophet. So, for example, we know that the prophet liked to have clean clothes, used to dress, I guess, nicely or cleanly, but some saints, they don't care about how they look, and they look very disheveled, and they're like, I don't care about my appearance. So, and there are a lot of other examples, but basically they employ different ways, and the prophet didn't I don't think the Prophet tried to get to people's hearts, the way like Sufi sheikhs do, for example, with like like zikr. I'm not sure if the Prophet did that. I haven't heard of it, but how are they students? What does it mean to be a student of the Prophet? That's, I guess, my question.
So when Brother Burkan said that these are not like mystical things with the saints, but like with what I understood, I feel like there was some element of karama that Imam Nursi is talking about, like those spiritual guides. And he mentioned this multiple times, that people of unveiling, or they unveiled the unseen and they witnessed it, and on the basis of their witnessing and the wondrous deeds, again, and he uses the word karama for it, I thought like karama were these acts of out of the ordinary things that we see these saints do. So I'm just a little confused on like, I thought he was referring to that, but you're saying it's more relatable. One more quick question. It's just like something that I'm curious about, but why are the deeds of the saints, like they're called deeds, like these karama, they're like categorized separately, but like anything that's out of the ordinary for us, if a prophet does it, we call it miracle, if someone has the answer for that.
Okay, we have 3 beautiful questions.
What is the question again, please? What prophet does is miracle, but what they do is karama? What's the question?
Yeah. You want to see?
I just wanted to know why did they define some miracles? Why did they have to do some kind of abnormal thing?
Nursi is saying that the saints are doing wondrous deeds, and he's saying that he actually uses the word karam.
But it was not the way, I guess. Yes, but it was not like to be considered a saint to show a karama. It was not this way, I guess. So this is what was being asked there. So I mean, it's not their defining property, I guess. At least the text was not going as such. But yes, like those people do demonstrate some karama. But what does this mean? I guess this is an important question. But as for Dua's question, within the text, author was talking about like the sun is known through 7 colors in its light. The saints' luminous colors, their light-filled hues, their true paths and right ways and veracious courses are manifested from the light of the pre-eternal sun through 70 colors. Indeed, through colors to the number of the divine names, and are all different. So like sun, when you look at sun has 1 color. But when you look at flowers, they're all different colors. So author is now making a allegory here, saying that when you look at the prophet, you do observe like Prophet ﷺ being like a perfect mirror to the sun. He is demonstrating all colors in one spot. But even when you look at Sahaba, you would observe that some of them are like very much into justice. The other one is very wise. The other one is super merciful. The other one is very shy or very modest. Like Prophet was not super scrupulous about being modest. It was like modest in a modest sense, but there are Sahaba which are super duper like modest to the extent that they say he's super shy. So this happened even at the time of Sahaba because this is human. Like Prophet being the perfect human as exemplary to the rest of humanity is demonstrating all of them in one spot, which in itself is a miracle. But for the people that followed, you do observe one person being a perfect mirror or a good mirror, let's say, for Rahim. Another one being like Jalal, and you see the guy is super like serious or super, I don't know, determined. Another person you see is like Kareem, like he keeps giving away whatever in his life. He's not storing anything in his end. If you say to Prophet, did he store something in his family? Yes, he did. But there are some people which are not give away everything. So you do observe this, and he is saying the way he's not presenting is that that person is clinging to truth from this name, and he finds truth. Like when you ask a question that to that person or try to find, let's say, a trace of mercy in his life, maybe it's not going to be as dominant. But for that person, he is so sure that Allah is Kareem, because in his life, he's giving away whatever comes to his hand. And through this act, he is realizing that Allah is Kareem. And he has no doubt about Allah being Kareem. And he found the necessary existence of such a being. So this is why in like different tariqas, you will see they will have different dhikr given to, like shuyukh will give different things to their students, because that person is became to get to know his creator through a certain name more specifically. So it becomes very important in his life. So I guess in general, like stereotypically, let's say woman is more merciful because like motherhood is inducing this feeling to woman more than men. So you can say that for mothers like Rahim, or it's even called Salai Rahim, like the brotherhood, sisterhood. So it's coming from the womb even. But the mercy and womb, it's not like coincidence that the words are the same. So you say that this person can find her creator through the mercy that she is experiencing. So this is where sainthood is going. So it's not like, oh, the Prophet didn't have this in his life. He had it, but he had it harmoniously. What's happening is once you take away certain things, then it appears as if out of ordinary or a little bit like the harmony is lost a little bit. Agreed. But just look at your life. Like, are you depicting Prophet's prophetic perfection or harmony of those characters? Definitely not. But whatever you and I are trying to demonstrate in our lives, by attributing it to the creator, not to our own ego, this is where the sainthood is taking the route. And this is why it is many colors. He says 7, 70, or even says up to the number of divine names. And in one of the prior discussions here, we mentioned there are infinitely many divine names, not only 99 that are being mentioned or listed, but infinitely many divine names, meaning whatever you are going through in life, your creator is inviting you in a specific way to find him, so you can become an expert of that name and get to find your creator.
I had a question. Sister's question, what does it mean in terms of or in the context of the teaching of the Prophet? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, for example, Nursi is one of those people claim to have some sort of knowledge. And he claims to follow the practices of the Prophet. So from my perspective, how do I know that that's really the case? And what is my criteria to sort things out? Because I think where the question comes from, there are a lot of people out there that they claim to be the righteous ones, and everyone has their own way. How do I know which one is the really right path to follow, or how do I discern what the teachings are?
Question. So the question, as far as I understand, is, how do you call someone the student of the Prophet if they're acting very differently? And also, Nursi, we're looking at how he's doing things or how others are living, and how do I choose, or how do I know one of them is on the path of the Prophet or is the correct path to follow, or how I should choose to follow them? Is that some form of understanding the question? Okay, that's
simple answer. I think it would be the way you would judge it is by seeing the person, how much sunnah they follow and how much they emulate the Prophet. Because it's difficult to stay consistent with actions and habits. So if you see their habits align with the habits of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, I think that's how you can gauge out how good of a student they are.
Anyone else? Maybe from the sisters, if you see someone, you're like, oh, they're off the path of prophethood, don't follow them. Do you ignore such people because of that, or do you say, this person is definitely on the path of prophethood, let me follow him or her? Or you're attending these discussions, how do we know we're on the path of prophethood? Maybe you're thinking, who are these people attending every week? What's this cult? Just coming here to eat fruits. I mean, how do you discern if we're on the path of prophethood or not? I guess no one knows. Oh, go ahead, yeah.
I guess if I'm speaking from my personal experience in terms of like choosing sort of to attend this like halakha group specifically in like the Tuesday discussions, I think like what stood out to me compared to maybe like previous forms of, I guess, like Islamic education I had was just realizing that the things like we discuss here were things that I sort of felt that I needed to hear. Like they were like of I guess they spoke to my like intellect first and foremost. And they also I think resonated with like what I felt I needed like as a human being to like learn about in terms of just knowing how to read sort of like the Quran and like understand the prophets into my like everyday like day-to-day life. So I think that is something that I feel like if I want to learn from from like someone like say a scholar or a guide, I think those are important factors that like I would consider in this journey. Yeah, I don't know if that made sense, but I guess that was just like my personal experience and like why I've I guess like been coming here. Yeah.
For me, I think like to answer the question of like how would I know if someone is like following the path of the prophet or so, I would think is like what Brother Yusuf was saying, how much do the divine names manifest in their daily life and their actions? So for example, would look at like how generous they are, how merciful they are, how good like in daily, like in their daily life, for example, for like just a small example, how how a mother is treating her child, or how a husband is talking to his wife. How like if a scholar, for example, let's say in a mosque, preaching every day about living like a humble life and down to earth and the way the prophet lived, and then he drives the best car ever invented or something, then I don't really exactly know where he's getting the money from, so I would kind of get like suspicious. Okay. Like, so I don't know things like I feel like, yeah, like how I think I would answer that as how do the divine names really, can I see them in their life? Can I see the generosity? Can I see the mercy? Can I see the justice also in their lives? If I can't see that, if I just see words and I don't see actions, then I would assume that they are not on the path of the prophet, and maybe I shouldn't really take them as my teachers or the saints that I should follow.
So from what I'm getting from what you said, Sarah, and like I'm engaging with you, but it's not necessary to you. I think you're talking about how they need to be virtuous, right? And so the question I'm posing is virtuosity enough? Like I can have really good atheist friends who are generous, humble, honest, maybe more honest than most Muslims I'm surrounded by. Are they on the path of prophethood? Speak for the
I
mics.
know is my wife, and she's not Muslim.
She's Ahl Kitab.
So, like, would that be really a criterion to say that, like, actually, yeah, that is the way to follow, and that it is actually gonna take me to the path of the prophet, and how is that really relates to the message?
And I don't think to say that you were saying like, okay, this is only what's necessary, right? You were just citing some of things that need to be included. But then that poses the question of what is necessary, like what is essential that I cannot find elsewhere, or else I mean prophethood. I mean, I don't want to veer the topic too far away, but it becomes redundant almost what prophethood offers.
Was there a hand here? Did you have your hand? No.
No, I've been thinking about this, and to answer this question, I would think like the best thing is like what Fahim mentioned in the beginning. And for this, I wanted to mention the Quranic ayat 91:8, وَعَلَّمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, that we have given you the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. And I think it is up to us to like see everything that is in front of us, like see through the lens of right and wrong, and see like if the path is being followed or not, and then discern it on ourselves. Like we cannot go on about, okay, this guy is doing this, so oh, he has like 1 million followers, so he must be right. If he has 1 follower, if he has million, if he has 1 billion followers, like it is our duty to like check everything that he is doing. And since like we know what is right and what is wrong, like, we have been given that consciousness, we need to get to that decision ourselves instead of relying on anything else. So, yeah.
I feel like Nursi is saying the opposite, though, at least from my understanding. He's saying that you must enter the classroom of the scholars, you must join the saints.
But you must. So, like, I think he had a point there. Like, you must join the group of prophets, meaning you should know the prophet, you should know your prophet, and then you should know your scholars, and then you should know your saints. Again, each representing, a different, let's say, maybe a level in your journey, right? You should know about the revelation. You should know the truthful of the revelation, the truth of the revelation, scholars, like the prophet, revelation, truth of the revelation, scholars, the life of the revelation, the living of the revelation, saints. You should go through all these the steps yourself. So even like when we say that, how do you know somebody is following the prophet or so? No, the actual question is whether you following the prophet or not. So that's the question, I think, at least to me, for the text, within the context of the text, whether you following the footsteps of the prophet or not. When you do that, you will interact with the scholars. You will interact with the scholars, and then you will interact with the saints so that you will learn how to live the message. Otherwise, somebody is living the message, somebody proved the message or not. It's not your business. If you are not trying to follow the prophet.
There was one point that Abdurrahman, you highlighted at the beginning when he was starting to talk about prophets, like prophets invited him, and he said, kneeling down in that school of light, he too paid heed to the lesson. So when he was starting to listen to prophets, he kneeled down in their school. So like in traditional Islamic teaching, like teacher stands somewhere, but you kneel down. But this is, I don't think, just like a figurative, like referring to how it had been, but it's also figuratively saying that, do you, when listening to the prophets, do you go there by, like, what is your attitude when you listen to the prophets? Do you kneel down and like respectfully listen to a prophet? Meaning, I do expect my creator to appoint someone who is better than me, and I'm going to take lesson from that person? Or do I have the attitude of, let me see what the guy is saying? Like sometimes, I mean, okay, scrutinizing to understand if this guy is true or false is one thing. But even conceptually saying that there must exist a human being who is better than me. I'm a bad person, or I'm not even doing decent in this life. If I admit this to myself by observing how I mess up things in my life, and I say, well, there must be a human being who does better, and my creator would talk to that person and would make that person a teacher to me. Because this is how it happens when I go to a medical doctor, for example. If I am sick, I am really humbly sitting before the doctor. I'm not trying to say that, you know, my title, I'm also a doctor. Like, I'm no one. I'm in need of this guy's knowledge at this moment. Humbly, I am accepting the knowledge of medical doctor at this moment, right? So when it comes to finding knowledge or seeking truth, this voyager knelt down before prophets. I think this was an important point, because with this attitude, and as Khadir said and Brother Birkan mentioned, now I am getting into a mood that I start with admitting my neediness. So I'm not trying to choose a teacher, a prophet, or whatever who is going to legitimize what I already concluded. This is separate. Like sometimes I want to live a certain life, and I'm looking for someone who can legitimize my ways. It's a separate issue. But if I am convinced that there must exist a maker, and I humble myself before that creator and saying that, yes, there must be a human teacher, because today we were studying Surah An-Naml. In there, Sulaiman alayhi salam is saying to Balqis, inviting to submission. Like we were saying, and at the end, the Queen of Sheba was submitting to Rabbul Alameen with Sulaiman, which is interesting. Like submitting to Rabbul Alameen with Prophet is ego crushing in a sense. So if I take it in this sense, then how am I going to know who is following the Prophet and whatnot? My measures are changing now, because now I'm not at the looking at the things with a scrutinizing way of trying to find mistakes, but rather humbly I am searching for where the message could have been. So I think this is one of the things that author was highlighting. And if we come to today's text, because he mentioned a few words, one was Sharia of Muhammad ﷺ and Miraj of Muhammad ﷺ. So how much do I concerned about these two? Like, could there be a sainthood, or to what extent could there be a sainthood? I'm not going to get into a technical discussion about it, but practically speaking, within the scale of this discussion for today, could there be a sainthood meaning being beloved of the Creator, without following the footprints of the beloved of the Creator? So this is why Sharia, putting Sharia as a scale in there was interesting, because sometimes we could take Sharia as superficial, you know, like the shapes and this and that, we can sometimes say. But if I take Sharia as, no, this is a key concept for me to practice submission, because in everybody said, if I put microphone to everybody say, oh, of course, everything belongs to God. Nobody claims they own anything. I don't own anything, if you ask me. But when it comes to Like if you press my ego from a certain aspect, then you see how I am starting to take my, what was this? Nails out. Then you say, oh, Yusuf, you were speaking very pious 5 minutes ago. What happened? Submitting is a totally separate thing. And it happens, or it shows its color in practical life. This is why Sharia is my litmus test to see how much I'm submitting. That's why I think author put sainthood within the footsteps of Sharia. So when comparing it, yes, Iman, we started with Iman. Iman and conviction is very important. But how do I know if I attain this conviction? Do you submit? If I do not submit, oh, then something is fishy going on there. I am being invited to submit so that I reinforce my Iman. This is why I think Amanu wa amilu salihat in there, sometimes this is being interpreted as Iman comes first, amilu salihat comes next. But you can also take, it's a wow, it could be understood multiple ways. Amanu wa amilu salihat, like they're right next to each other. Like it's not like first 10 years you're going to do Iman and the next 5 years go to do amilu salihat. I mean, fine, if that's how it could be understood in this way, but I don't think this is how it had been applied in prophetic life. Neither does the author does it this way. So amen wa amilu salihat, and in this case, this is why I think putting of Sharia in there and then saying Miraj on top of this, like Prophet's ascension. This person demonstrated this journey in his life. So let me put an effort to see how Prophet did this. Again, we will go to then narrations, but then go and look at the scholarship, how they practiced this. Go and look at the saints, how they did this. And as a human being, you have those tools to relate to them. And I guess this is there, as Qadir, I think, beautifully concluded. Then you're going to be the judge whether this is what it is. Of course, you cannot pass beyond that, but this might give somewhat of a feasible framework, at least. I think that can work for me. And I know we are off time, but 1-2 sentences about the, I think it was an important question, just so that we do not miss the question about Karama versus miracle. So Karama means like giving gifts. So somebody is taking some effort and the creator is encouraging them in a sense, saying that you are taking a road and your creator gives you an effort. Let's say Sister Zerine is working in the laboratory day and night, and she's trying to solve a problem. Tomorrow morning, or maybe sometimes in her dream, she wakes up and says, I found it. This is a karama of her effort. Even an atheist would receive this sort of a gift of the creator. Would he or she know it from the creator? Maybe, maybe not. But this is a gift from the creator. Now, those people are truly putting effort to find their creator, and the creator gives them a gift, but the distinction is this person is aware that it is from my creator. Because I was not expecting such a gift to come. So, like, I mean, many such, kirama is being mentioned, but the distinction is in everybody's life you can see kirama, but it wouldn't be called kirama. It would be sometimes, oh, this guy is genius. They will attribute it to themselves. But since this person is carefully focusing and finding the creator, then he would say it is nothing but the gift of my creator. In case of prophets, though, prophet is coming up with a claim that I am prophet of God, and the purpose of this is to confirm this. Like it's an intentional act. Kirama is not an intentional act. It's a gift from the creator. And it's more so like a support for the creator is responding back to you for what you put. And like, where's my man? Like this brother goes 2 hours, 6 times in the gym, and he is being gifted with increased muscle. Like this is a kirama of his actions. But does he take it from himself? Or because what's happening, and if you go and ask for Sufi tradition, you will see that they are going through a path, and after a certain point, they do, like it's, if you like, statistically expected that they will receive a gift in the journey. But because they are putting this effort in there, and the Creator keeps giving people such gifts in their lives, but they attribute it to their Creator, not to themselves. But this shows that this guy, now you go and say to the guy, oh, you're such a perfect person. He would say, la, 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 astaghfirullah, I'm not. I am sure it is gift of my Creator. And this is he's so sure and saying, no way, it's not from me. So this is why it's going to be a support for their path. If you are following like saint, his kirama is definitely going to be a sign of his Creator. But if you are following a professor, his kirama is going to be shown as what? Sign of his genius. So he can deceive you with his kirama by attributing it to himself. But a saint, this is where the saint would differ, saying that, oh no, this is a gift of my Creator, not a gift of my genius. So otherwise, I think in everybody's life, you would observe many gifts.
Thank you. I think the sisters and Brother Osman's question still needs improvement. Maybe next time you may want to use a hint from the text, because I really like how Yusuf developed his arguments, but there are some additional keywords here. It's not just talking about practicing Sharia, because give me your ears. It says those guys, sacred people, are who were striving toward the truth and attaining the vision of certainty in the Sharia. I don't know what does that mean, but you may want to talk about that, okay? It's not only practicing something, it's about seeking truth via those things. It's not the traditional way of describing what's Sharia, right? So there might be some room for improvement. The second thing is, in the Quranic understanding, unfortunately, most of the adjectives are today considered as nouns. I know it's a very theoretical debate, but long story short, for example, Muslim is always understood as an adjective in the first 3 centuries, and it's always used as an adjective in the Quranic understanding, but today we are writing it as a capitalized N. We use it as a noun. So we define something as a Muslim, as a continuous feature, right? But in the Quranic understanding, it's an adjective. So it means at moments that you act as a Muslim, as Quran defines you as a Muslim. In the moments that you don't, act as a Muslim, Quran does not define you as a Muslim. So that's a very important principle, because when it comes to, saints or scholars, we can just look if a specific action fits to that definition, then we can consider that specific action as a scholar or saint action. And if you cannot find how to do that, then you may doubt, or if you know how to do that, maybe you can reject, but only that part of the, action coming from somebody called a scholar. Or that's also another important angle that might, provide your future discussions. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for your contributions. And we can end the session here, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.